I am exploring the long-term impact of the Khmer Rouge genocide, and especially its impact on education. This includes revisiting our family history with that country and its people. Rather than creating a documentary about genocide, I see it as context for the real focus of my project, which is capturing the unfinished stories from Cambodians, and particularly from Sarat and his family. There have been other photographic projects this module, which have led to reflections on my practice. For instance, I shot a meeting with the politician Owen Smith during an anti-Brexit event. I also spent 4 days documenting the visit of Andrew Melengeni. Andrew was a cellmate of Nelson Mandela during the apartheid years. He was in London to receive the freedom of the city, amongst other things, and he was meeting with the royal family. As I reflect on these events, I'm doing, I believe, a technically solid job, and it's appreciated by my clients. The images contain environmental context, and the subject's character comes through. But I am observing events, indexically and somewhat dispassionately. Effectively, I'm being a press reporter, and I'm striving for more than that in my Cambodia work. I travelled to Cambodia again. I had several objectives for the trip, reflecting both imagery needed and changes in my photographic practice. First, I was experimenting with different approaches to portraits, striving for more intimacy and engagement without losing context. Second, I was finding and capturing new personal stories and seeking new ways to bring them to audiences. Thirdly, I was looking to capture traces of stories and of the genocide itself. And finally, I was exploring how best to present this work, particularly in Cambodia, which has led to the idea of publishing a book, hopefully this year, in Khmer. With my friends and colleagues Sarat, Simet and Shreddy, we travelled to some of the schools in the ex-Khmer Rouge areas. We met the staff and children, and part of this was rephotography of the places and people involved. But I was also seeking new stories. I had met Cheng Den several times before, at a school near Trapeang Prasat. Yet only on this trip did I hear that her son Metta, who started in the school, is now doing a PhD in Japan, a wonderful example of the positive power of education, and a timely reminder that I had done less than a stellar job of capturing data on our previous visits. Again, a change in my practice. But perhaps most importantly, the people that I was with, who I'd known for 20 years, started opening up and telling me their stories, some that none of us had heard before. Let me turn now to one of several development areas that I see are required in my practice: intimacy. By that, I mean better rapport with and understanding of my subjects. Intimacy is not just an emotional connection, it's a connection of understanding. The movement towards traces in my contextual and landscape work is starting to nudge those images in an interesting direction. The combination of physical closeness, abstraction, and detail to engage the viewer shows promise, and this could apply to my portrait work. Abby Traylor-Smith's image, which took second prize in the Taylor Wessing, shows rapport with the subject. The girl's haunted, or haunting expression, speaks volumes about what she's experienced, and poses questions about her story. To be critical, though, one wonders if eye contact would help even this terrific image. On this last trip, I therefore consciously explored different approaches to portrait work. For example, I think this is an impactful, stark execution, but on reflection needed more time to shoot with a better lighting setup. I also photographed Sarat's neighbours. In conversation, we came up with the idea of picturing them with portraits from their past. I think that could be a theme to develop further, linking past and present in a way that begs questions. I do think these are stronger than the candid portraits I produced in Positions and Practice, but I do not want to document everything via photographic storyboards, nor do I want to use stereotypical Hollywood-style walk-in-the-jungle images. I'd already decided to use video as part of my project, so I was experimenting with that.
It was in 1977, when I was 14 years old. I miss my mom very much, because at that time a lot of people die while they are working, at the front line area. So I thought what happened to her. So I planned to see her what was happened. It took 2 weeks to decide to go to see her. Actually, at that time, if I go to the village without permission from the Khmer Rouge, and I got killed.
Let me turn now to discuss my work on context and environment. Part of this project is to go back and re-photograph sites that we've been to many times before. This is Chung Ek, the killing fields, and you can still see the many shallow graves across the site. I've been taking photographs here since 1994. The signs, well, they're still there, very much the same, although things are now built up and controlled. I did try some rephotography, but frankly the way I did it was a bit of a trope, so it wasn't really satisfactory. I'm not a landscape photographer in the sense that I carefully set up the scene, use a tripod and so on, but I'm always looking for stories. In effect, I'm more a street photographer in the landscape. I've looked for details inside each scene. This has partly been why I've been gravitating towards the traces idea. In working through the Photography Without a Camera project, I rediscovered cyanotypes. This led me into the creation of more purposeful images and got me exploring negatives as a way of asking my audience questions about what they are seeing. These are the subject of my landings contribution. In earlier Cambodian work, I created images which could be, and in fact were, critiqued as dark tourist photographs, rather literal records of the museums and mass graves. I thus went back to Tuol Sleng to take more pictures. First, here's an interesting but rather straightforward record of the cells. Then here's an image of the same place that begs questions. Why the number 13? What does it represent? Who was in the cell, etc. So it's not just about taking close-ups or extractions. It's about considering the implication of the image, including how it might be viewed by an audience. In a way, it's a more mindful approach to photography than I have often practiced in the past. My traces work is inspired by, amongst others, Sophie Risselhuber. In some ways, she defined the concept of aftermath photography with her work in Iraq. Her work is compelling, moving from large scale to close in, from aerial to details on the ground. Taken together, there's a very clear narrative. However, whilst graphically strong, I do find it somewhat observational. Christian Swego made a series, My Lovely Bosnia, around the still present landmines in the country. Some are illustrating the landscape with landmines in situ. Others show the beautiful countryside. The overall effect is engaging, almost poetic. However, I do feel the need to be closer. Almost at the other extreme, Adam Broomberg and Olivia Chanarin created a series on the Red House, a prison facility in Iraq. They focused on the graffiti. This is very much in the traces genre that I'm exploring. Who were the people that made these graffiti? And what happened to them? Yet somehow it lacks the context of the prison. So, how has all this affected my work in progress? Well, I decided to focus on Sarat's trip through the wood to see his mother, which I blogged about in my CRJ. I did not want to create a storyboard, I wanted to imply the journey. Beyond completing this module, there's a lot going on. I'm conducting a street portrait workshop in Bath this weekend. Some of my traces images are being featured in a Photo Bath group exhibition in September. They are also being featured in a book at the same time. And I am working by remote with Sarat to create a book of stories, which we hope to publish in Cambodia and Khmer in the next few months. In summary, I believe that this Surfaces and Strategies module, as well as feedback I received last module, is shifting my practice. I'm taking imagery in a more mindful, almost abstracted way, whilst retaining the strengths I believe I had in capturing context. I'm also aiming for a more consistent, intimate approach, which I'm now starting to better define and use in both portrait and landscape work. And I am continuing to explore new media and modes of presentation of my work for the eventual audience. Thank you for listening.